we've already been given much to think about during this service. Let's take a few minutes now to think of the faith journey of the bleeding woman. What makes this story important and relevant to us? Let's start with the historical significance. What is the context of the story? Two things: the laws regarding menstruation and impurity, and the social class context regarding men and women of the Judaic first century. As we know, the social culture of the social culture of that time elevated men over women. And it's important for our story that we read the Bible in its cultural context to appreciate the fullness of its meaning. Men were seen as being predictable, and their social and physical status was set. As a result of this fixed identity, it was believed that he could control himself, his wife, his wives, his society, and nature. So if men were predictable, women were unpredictable, and they were unstable and had an unstable identity. Truth be told, some of those perspectives are still alive and well today. I'll say more, but I said it would be shorter. Leviticus 15:19. When a woman has her regular flow of blood, the impurity of her monthly period will last 7 days, and anyone who touches her will be unclean till evening. A huge disparity between women and men's life in first century Judaism. So let's think of the bleeding woman based on first century norms. She would have been untouchable for 12 years. She might have feared being ostracized, for she would have been in contact with many on her way to Jesus in the crowd. She might have feared that Jesus would avoid healing her. I have 4 images this morning that I will display that highlight for me aspects of the story of the bleeding woman. I've shown some of these images here before, and yet they continue to feel so poignant that I am using them again. And today we talk about the bleeding woman, not the woman who bled, which was an aspect of her life. There's a big difference. She is the bleeding woman. Her condition would have altered the shape of her days and her thinking in all aspects of life. The first is a painting that many of you are probably familiar with, The Scream by Edvard Munch, a Norwegian painter. I kept returning back to this painting as I read the scripture passage, the anguish, the pain, the despair. As I prepared for this Sunday, what kept running through my brain was lament. Lament for the bleeding woman, as well as lament or the pain that we all carry. Many in our community carrying weight that some of us may or may not know about. We watch the images on TV, and the images of the world just feel so heavy right now. The silent scream. My guess is that many of you can think of a time when you felt like that painting, the diagnosis for you or someone you love, the debilitating depression, a difficult death, deep loneliness, a time when you did not know the way ahead, a memory that is seared in your brain. It was 10 months ago in March. I was in the picturesque town of Panajachel, Guatemala, a week off in the midst of a work trip. I woke up to the gentle breezes, blooming bougainvillea outside my hotel room, and an email from my brother stating that my niece had a brain aneurysm and life was looking precarious. I was walking the streets, not really aware of my surroundings and in disbelief, almost paralyzed as to the next steps. As I worked with the hotel front desk and the travel agent to get myself back to Guatemala City, 4 hours away, where the international airport was located, I was told there was a national-wide strike with 66 roadblocks between Panajachel and Guatemala City. I was looking at options. As tourist vans were not running, I had money, but no taxi would drive there, unable to get through. The stunning view, the colorful markets, and even the wondrous smell of the flowers all faded away as I couldn't see the way ahead for the next few days. I was surrounded by people and yet felt totally alone. The roads did end up opening a few days later, and I made a long trip home. Silent screams. I was supported by family, lots of texts with John, friends checking in once they heard, and phone conversations with family. And also cries of, my God, as I tried to picture the hotel room, the hospital room, the grieving family, the letting go. I thought of the woman, the bleeding woman who for 12 years had cried, my God, surrounded by people, and yet completely alone. She had a terrible life. Lamentations are a part of our journey of faith, a cry directed to God. So we lament. And I believe it is good to lament in our pain, to cry out, to say we do not understand. As John mentioned earlier, the story of Jairus' daughter and the unknown woman are intertwined, making them more powerful in relation to one another. What strikes me is that both Jairus and the unnamed woman, one with power and wealth, known by many, and the other unnamed, poor and ignored in her setting, and one imploring Jesus to come, and the other crawling to just touch the hem of his coat. Both are in deep, deep anguish. Pain does not distinguish between rich, poor, political affiliations, power or powerless. The scream, audible or silent, pain of loneliness, pain of grief, pain of despair. Can we have the next slide, please? Oh. My second image is that of the Latin American depiction of a woman touching the edge of Jesus' serape. This is art by Claudia Martinez, and this comes from the Peace Table. The unnamed woman was an outcast in her society. This image so clearly shows the wariness of the crowd, the disbelief, the disdain. Thinking of the audacity of the woman to look to Jesus, to be in their midst. Eyes tell us a lot. Our words can say one thing, and yet it is harder for our eyes to lie. This bleeding woman had no control and probably no money left. We are told that she used it all to try and find a cure. We all want to be healed and are willing to try whatever it takes. I am sure we all know examples of people who are willing to try alternative treatments, travel to different places, doing whatever it takes, sometimes for themselves, sometimes for their children, our children, struggling with addictions, mental health, or physical health, seeking for a sense of wholeness, a sense of control. A third image. The woman touching the cloak of Jesus. This woman had heard of Jesus, but her condition was so embarrassing and ostracizing that she could not meet Jesus face to face. She felt she could not plead to Jesus as Jairus had done. She opted to conceal her identity and try out a commonly held belief in the Greco-Roman world that power could reside in the clothing of devout Jewish leaders. If I could but touch his clothes. She elbowed her way through the crowd with a mixture of desperation and hope. I chose this image due to the crowds and people pressing on one another, and the disciples scoffing when Jesus asked, "Who touched me?" Jenny Denny ascertains that this was probably not for Jesus' lack of knowledge, rather as an opportunity for the woman to be identified, drawn out from the throng of people. Jesus wants the crowd to know what she had done. It is further affirmation that no one has been made unclean by her jostling and touch. Her humiliation had been public for so long. Jesus desires to publicly announce her physical, social, and spiritual healing. This story moves from a superstitious belief and magical healing to one where Jesus desires a personal connection. Another commentary, Diane Strickland, writes that with the woman touching Jesus' cloak, she had never, quote, felt more humble or more powerful. I had to think of that phrase. Never more humble or more powerful. It takes a strength to come out of isolation, to mingle in a crowd where you know you are not wanted, to reach for the cloak of Jesus, humble in her being, powerful in her pursuit and her belief. Strickland goes on to write, "This story is a wonderful affirmation of a woman's faith in Jesus, her healer. The cloth still shivers in the crowd. Our faith still counts with Jesus, and we are never more humble or more powerful." My final image is from a Singaporean artist called Chung Wee Ping, and her interpretation of the story is entitled Hope in Jesus. Jesus provides the unnamed woman with acceptance and restored relationships. While Jesus speaks with the woman, the attention is first drawn to her strength and then to her healing. It was her strength of perseverance that spurred her to action for her physical healing, and it was her strength of faith that moved her towards responding to Jesus' calling her out of her shame. Her action of telling the truth led to a change in her circumstances. She was restored. She could again move in the temple and among her community. In this story, Jesus is redefining the restrictive codes enforced upon women because of their physiological makeup, an act of faith over the law. I am moved when I read the next verse. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." From outcast to family, from unknown to being seen, from hopelessness to being whole. Think of how this woman's life would have been changed. This image so beautifully shouts out her personhood, her being seen, her sense of belonging. I wonder if now she will go out welcoming others who are seen as outcasts. John made sure I didn't forget about the rocks. A concept that is relatively new to me is that of being a stone thrower, a stone avoider, or a stone catcher. I believe Brian Stevenson, an African-American law professor, coined the phrase. This story highlights all three. The stone thrower is certain. People yelling out, "This woman is unclean. The scriptures say so." The word we could use to talk about this is fear. Stones are heavy with fear, disguised as holiness. To throw one is to keep brokenness safely out there. Who is in and who is out? The stone avoider is quieter. They don't condemn, but they don't intervene either. They hope mercy will happen without costing them anything. Avoidance feels safer than cruelty, but it still leaves the wounded exposed. If I am honest, I would probably find myself in this camp much too often. Then there is the stone catcher. To catch a stone is to place yourself between accusation and the accused, to absorb what was meant to wound. With a hemorrhaging woman, Jesus catches more than stones. He catches shame, impurity laws, and social risk. Jesus names her daughter. He restores her publicly, not just physically. In our world, the question is not whether stones will fly. They always do. The question is where we stand when they do. Jesus invites us to catch, to let mercy cost us something, and to trust that love is stronger than every stone. What we are witnessing in Minneapolis right now is a lot of stones flying in the form of raids, apprehension, based on ethnic profiling. We're also seeing many people coming out and moving beyond stone avoiders and gathering in churches to sing, to pray, and to unite, believing that love is stronger than hate. We saw a man intervening with a woman thrown to the ground, a stone catcher, which cost him his life. Who are the stone catchers in your life? And it's not always the big events, but it's also welcoming the stranger, educating ourselves about the world realities, listening with compassion, standing up for injustice. Finally, we return to the beginning of the story of the bleeding woman, her cries of pain and our own groans of despair. In the same way that Jesus welcomed the hemorrhaging woman, acknowledged her grief and her pain, being a stone catcher, so God is open to our lamentations and our cries of angst. As Jesus embraced the nameless woman, so God embraces us. Please join me in reading the prayer that is on the overhead. Please join me. May our silent internal groaning be met with compassion. May our words of frustration be met with love. May our screams and yells of anger be met with empathy. May our tears be met with understanding. May we find peace and rest. Jesus said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." The story asks us, in places where we find injustice, where we find grief and pain, will we move in and be instruments of healing and being stone catchers? May it be so.